And from that, I now give to our Executive Director, Horst Heitz.
Yes, we have still left to start, but I think everybody, are questions left? Everybody comfortable? So only for short, the commissioner will come a little bit before 10 because he's in a meeting with von der Leyen. Only for perhaps I will do a little short introduction how the program will be. First, of course, the welcome and opening. Then, if we have time, a first round of question and answers. Then we have the commissioner, and he will give us a keynote speech. The introduction is by Mr. Stefanetz. And then we have the possibility for 3 questions. And they will be from Ms. Weiss, from Mr. Abruzzini, and from Mr. Nowatzki, sorry. And then we're going to the impulse statements and to the open discussion with the experts. Is everything clear from this side?
Yeah.
Wunderbar, wunderbar. Then, like Germans are doing this, we're starting 9:30 sharp.
We like that in Denmark.
Yes.
We appreciate very much from the Nordic countries to be on time.
Yes, I will. I'm
Also from the southern country, we appreciate it.
Ah, that's great. That's great.
That's why we are in Europe.
And that's why we are SME Europe.
Yeah.
Mm.
I see also that now the participants are rising. We have 180 registrations. Now we have 75.
Wow.
Yeah, registrations means not that everybody is coming.
No, no, no. I know my staff has been struggling a little bit, but
Horst, I see that Paul Rubisch is asking for the link. In the
which link?
In the Q&A, that there is a message.
Okay, I will send it to him.
Can you check it out?
Yes, thanks. And also FYI to everybody, the commissioner is already logged in, but he's not there yet. He will join as soon as his previous meeting ended. So he's already in the panel discussion.
Yeah.
Then we're starting, it's 9:30. To all participants and speakers, a warm welcome and good morning. I hope everybody is healthy, and I think this is really a time of crisis, a difficult time. I think it's also a time of human tragedies in different ways. So we have always to think, if you are talking about business and economy, also people are suffering and dying. But we have also to look forward how we can keep a future, how people can survive economically, because this is the second part of this crisis. And I think it's very important that SME started now to involve SMEs and experts here now in this moment to discuss how we can help, how we can save the moment and keep the future. And some words about SME Europe. SME Europe is the business organization of the European People's Party. We are representing 400,000 SMEs. And for us, it is very important now that we can keep the contact directly from Brussels to the member states. And for that, we're starting with our first webinar about COVID-19, a coordination European economic response for SMEs. We have 90 minutes time. We have also the possibilities for question and answers. And I will give you an overview over the program. The welcome is by Ivan Stefanetz, member of the European Parliament, our president, member of the Internal Market and Consumer Protection Committee. The opening is by Pernille Weiss, member of the European Parliament, board member of SME Europe, member of the Committee of Environment, Public Health and Food Safety, member of the Committee of Industry, Research and Energy. As keynote statement, we will welcome a little bit later Executive Vice President Valdis Dombrovskis, European Commission. And then we have also the pleasure to have input statements from Arnaldo Abruzzini, Chief Executive Officer Eurochambre, Marcin, Vice President, Union of Entrepreneurs and Employees of Poland, Benedikt Blomeyer, Director of EU Policy Allied for Startups, and Amrit Dreschneider, Head of European Affairs, Austrian Saving Banks Association. And my name is Horst Heitz, Executive Director of SME Europe. And now I give the floor free for Ivan Stefanets.
Thank you very much, Horst, and good morning, everybody. Welcome to our
You have
first
to turn on your
webinar.
micro.
Can you? Yeah, good. Good morning, everybody, once again. Really,
We
as you
don't
said,
hear you.
We hear you. I hear him. Everybody hears him, I think.
all right. So, good morning.
Okay.
I do believe really current situation is unique for everybody, and nobody of us experienced it before, but we do understand the priority to fight for lives and to protect public health. But I do believe we have to think always about future, and our future lies on our SMEs. Therefore, we are here today to discuss very important issues. I'd like to start with thanking, and firstly, I would like to thank you, Horst, and your team for preparation for this first video event. I do believe it will be the proof that we can communicate and we can work also in this way. Secondly, I'd like to say a big thank you to you, Pernil, also for your activity and your idea to come with survey, because we were very active and it was the idea of Pernil Weiss, our board member, to ask what SMEs really need. And I think it's very important to know the obstacles and the issues which current SMEs are dealing with. This survey is currently in 5 European languages, and it will be also collected before Easter. So I'm looking forward to these results. And thirdly, I'd like to say thank you to everybody who attends this event, especially those who will contribute. What is now important? Firstly, I think it's very important to prioritize SMEs in all European decisions and all decisions on the national level, because we have to think about the future. And I have addressed the importance of SMEs also to the European Commission at the beginning of this crisis, and I'm satisfied that even Madame Ursula von der Leyen highlighted the importance of SMEs in the first package of 37 billion euro aid. Secondly, I think it's very important to not forget the fight against bureaucracy, even now. And we as SME Europe, we have addressed also to the European Commission by the letter this issue, and we stress out the fact that we have to always think how to make life easier for SMEs and how to remove all the unnecessary constraints. And thirdly, I think it's also important to talk about access to finance. We understand almost all SMEs will face the financial difficulties, and I'm extremely happy that today we will have Valdis Dombrovskis, who really understands this issue, and he has already prepared many good proposals. Dear friends, this situation is really unique, but we are here to help SMEs, and I'm looking forward to this new experience and particularly to the new ideas. SME Europe is ready to listen, SME Europe is ready to work, SME Europe is ready to help. So welcome everybody, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ivan. And now I think you pointed out really the very important issues. And I think we will hear in this webinar more about this. And we will have also feedback from the audience, what is their ideas. And I think it's really important that we are close to the people, that we are listening to the people, and that we act fast. And we don't forget there were also before the crisis problems, and we could solve it now. We could do reforms now, who perhaps stocks all the time. And I think this in this crisis perhaps also a chance for the future. And now for the opening, Pernille Weiss, the floor is yours.
Thank you, but I will stay seated here in front of the camera. Thank you, Ivan. I called you now it's 3 weeks ago when I was having a little bit of COVID-19 myself in my flat in Brussels, and I was feeling like a lion in a cave. Also in dialogue with my network in SMEs, especially of course in Denmark, telling me the troubles that they were dealing with, all the questions that they had, all the informations floating around about what can Denmark do to its own SMEs, and what is the EU doing. And I got this idea together with a friend from Denmark who also has an SME. For others who don't know me, until I was elected May last year to the parliament, I for 13 years had my own enterprise, a small one. When I was at the peak, we were about 26 people employed in my company, working as a consultant in the building industry. And that is why I talked with my friend back home in Denmark about how it was right now to be an SME. Then the idea came up. Thank you so much, Lotte. If you are around here on this webinar, we really owe you a big thank for your competences in designing also the questions. Therefore, thank you very much to you, Lotte Hansen. But yes, we made this survey, Ivan and I, together with you, Horst, and your team, up against the wind, because it's a very stressful, a very panicking time in Europe's history, where a lot of goodwill is present, but what we need a more solid ground to work from. And that is where the survey and the data comes in. And I had a very little sneak watch in the data yesterday evening. Thank you very much, Horst. And the picture shows that translation is, language is key for a common understanding and a dialogue, mostly of course, in times of crisis. So I look forward for the survey to engage in more languages, so that SMEs, especially in countries in Europe which are not that digital as my own country is. That's one of the observations that I make, and I think that it is very, very healthy that SME Europe with this webinar is opening a new era of a more digital dialogue with the SMEs around in Europe, and then we improve this tool continuously also after the Corona crisis, because it is so valuable for us politicians in the parliament, and of course for us working in the committees related to politics that inflicts the life and the possibilities of SMEs as the backbone of the European economy, that we know more about what is going on, that we get inspired, but also that we can help to improve the impression around in the SMEs of what can Europe actually do for them. Because Corona crisis is about health, it's about economy, of course, but it's also about the cohesion of us as Europeans working together when times are difficult. And it is so easy to blame those that are not in your neighborhood, and EU is something abstract still. Down in Brussels or up in Brussels. So I think that by doing this survey and moving SME Europe into this webinar and digital age, we can encourage a lot of SMEs to also move in the digital wave together with the climate wave. And of course, the very, very important recovery wave after this Corona crisis. So that is my hope, that we can have this as an intention, and that we can use the solid work done the last couple of weeks. Again, thank you, Horst and your team, for doing so that SMEs around in Europe, they really see SME Europe as the door to have both information, but also to give information and to have discussions, debates, dialogue with us politicians, also together with the organizations. So also thank you for you who are here in this webinar, who are not coming from the SME businesses, but actually coming from banks and institutions and organizations. It's very much valued that we are being innovative and tearing down the silos in between each other to actually do something that is cross-disciplinary and cross-sectorial. That's very, very important. So, yeah, you said very wisely, Ivan, that before Corona crisis, there were a lot of challenges. There were a lot of strategies to be made practical in the real world. Climate, of course, digital market, of course, and a lot of barriers in the single market. I cannot add more to that list, except for also one little thing that I think we should address in this webinar and also later on, and that is the trade agreements, the trade with the third markets globally. We are living in a time where globalization is going a little bit backwards. There's a lot of protectionism, and now we are in an era where we need to embrace state aid as a tool we need to use. But coming from the political party that I come from in Denmark, free trade is the foundation of a healthy market. And that is also what Europe has been fighting for and working to develop for many, many, many years. And I would like to just put a note that let's keep an eye on our obstacles, but also the opportunities right now to kick start again SMEs work with the trade agreements, because before Corona it was not that brilliant, and now in the recovery after Corona it will key to get the muscle of the SMEs actually back healthy to the backbone of European economy. Yeah. So again, thank you all. I can see 7 people, but maybe Horst, you can, before we move on, just let us know how many is now in this meeting.
113.
Wow.
Yes, it's a lot of attention here now.
That's very good. Welcome, everybody.
Yes, and then I think this shows that we really embracing now the new technology, and this is perhaps also
sure.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned very important points. I think what we have also from the survey feedback from SMEs, they want to have a stronger role of Europe, because we see now what is the result if only one country or 2 countries coming strong out of this crisis, others are weak, because you cannot be strong if your partners are weak. And I think
exactly
a common response of Europe, if Italy is weak or Spain and Germany or Sweden is coming out strong, what is the result? It will come to conflicts as we have already with overbounds, what is mentioned. But we have also from the survey, and I think this was a great idea, how fragmented SMEs are. We have to start from self-employment also. We have to start also to think on startups. This is why we invited also a representative of startups, because they wanted to start this business in this moment. Now the crisis is there. They invested already money. So we have also to see, it's not only to save, it's only to create future. And I think what is also interesting is the next 3 months is for the SMEs very important if they are surviving or not. What I have often the response, that it's different in Europe, but the government's acting fast and then it stops. The ideas are there, the laws are there, and then it stops. So we have to discuss what Mr. Ivan Stefanec said, how to put down the bureaucracy here. And I think Switzerland is doing there a very great job because they're giving already now 500,000 Swiss francs loans without any obligations, without any, you have up to 5 years time to pay it back. So I think that's acting very fast. And I think this is also possible because Switzerland is rich. But now I think it's the time to have questions from the audience. It's your turn. Please raise your hand. Ask questions to Mr. Ivan Stefanec and to Pernille Weiss. Floor is yours. And Mr. Henrik Rammelk is collecting. And
okay, first question I have is from our honorary president, Dr. Paul Rübig. So the floor is yours.
Our honorable president, yes, Paul Rübig, the floor is yours.
Okay, sounds like Mickey Mouse.
Yes.
Mr. Rübig.
I've seen the technical problems are not completely solved.
Yeah, I mean, okay, Mr. Rübig, I think something is wrong with your microphone. You sound a little bit high-pitched.
I spoke yesterday with him, but it was working, so.
Maybe if you write your question directly to me and I will read it out.
Or restart perhaps the webinar. This could be.
Oh, it's cute. It's very, very cute.
And I know Paul Rübig has very good content normally to say. It's really a pity that it's not working out.
Well, I will give him a hug next time I see him.
So perhaps we move on until the technical problem is solved. Who is the next?
Okay, one question there is from Domagoj Milosevic, which I will now unmute. The floor is yours, Mr. Milosevic.
Hello, good morning.
Milosevic is member of the Croatian Parliament and Vice President of SME Europe. And
hello to everybody. I hope you are and your families are doing all very well under the circumstances. Well, my question from the beginning of the crisis was really what can Brussels, what can European Union do to enable the logistics? Because at this moment, when basically the different governments, different reactions to movement of the people within the countries, outside, that's one issue. But for SMEs, but for all the business, it's essential to enable the logistics so that the transportation of the goods follows on. I've read some of the reactions, some of the kind of decisions, but I would love to hear if we could really have for this one, but also for the any future issues that may happen to enable this. This is at this moment, to keep at least some level of the economic exchange and to not to lose too much of the GDP. We are all going to lose part of our GDP, but logistics is important at this moment. I don't have to explain, so please, you could provide some information.
So who would like to answer the question first? Pernille Weiss, please, the floor is yours. And then Ivan Stefanec.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for the very precise questions. I cannot answer them both in depth, but I really appreciate that you put forward the question about the transport and the practical functioning of the single market. Sadly to say, because we do not have in Europe and EU a contingency plan for what we do in times of an epidemic going pan across the continent. It shows that there is a lot of implementation of the single market in terms of transport of goods, raw materials, products, workers across the European borderlines that are still not working, and that is a very that's very shameful actually, because we are actually doing it more difficult for ourselves that we could have if we did not have these implementation issues before the corona, and now we are facing them more dominant due to the crisis. So I think that we should be very fast moving and creative in between ITRA and transport to an IMCO, of course, to put that up front in a triangle cooperation between those three committees on how can we improve to implement the practicalities of a real single open market for goods and workers and raw materials. It's shameful that we have not done that before the crisis, and now we are facing all the problems. And in the contingency plan for the future, we of course must have both what is now called blue lines and green lines, because green lines is for medical stuff and for medical experts to not be held back because of internal border controls. And then there is the blue lines, which are for goods, for food, of course, but also for a lot of the products that people still need and that SMEs still produce. That is how we keep our muscle, the single market, still working and sweating good and healthy sweat during a period of corona crisis. So I don't think, maybe even you can add to that possibility of the three committees, IMCO, ITRA, and our colleagues in transport to co-create very fast an implementation of all the single market rules in border areas and regions. Thank you.
Because we got a lot of questions now, so I think we should have only one answer to one question, otherwise the time is running out. We have a first question and a second question also from Croatia. It's from Simon Ferjuk. It's written questions. He has a business in Croatia, but he's living in Slovenia, and now he get not support from the government. So is this perhaps a common problem that we have to face, that people are embracing the internal market, opening businesses in different member states, but not living in these states? How we can solve this on a European level? Ivan Stefanec, perhaps you have an idea?
Yes, I'd like to say that I totally agree with Perni's answer to Domagoj's question. And on top of that, what we can do much more on European level to show that the EU is stronger, it is exactly by financial tools. So the lines, especially say funding lines from European Investment Bank to SMEs, it would be the best way how to help and how to show the strengths of the European Union. I'm pretty sure that Valdis Dombrovskis is the best guy to answer that and to also talk about many new initiatives he has already presented in the European Parliament. But this is exactly the tool how we can help SMEs from the European level. And just on top of that, what Pernil has mentioned about internal market, just today we will talk with Commissioner Thierry Breton at IMCO, Internal Market Committee, exactly how to guarantee internal market, how to improve that we can cooperate much better. I'm coming from Slovakia, where 90% of GDP is created by export, so we are depending on the internal market, and as most countries in EU, so we have to keep internal market alive. I know that there is a lot of protectionism, but we have to see it still from the European level. And I think it is related to the flow of goods, and particularly it is now related to the financing from European institutions.
The next question is from Mira Maria Konkanen, Federation of Finnish Enterprises, to Pernilla Weiss, highlighted the importance of coordinated EU response to the crisis and the recovery of the crisis. What do you see as the most crucial elements to be included in the EU's recovery action plan? Who would like to answer this? What is the crucial element of the EU action plan? What is the key element? In fact, this is a question for Dombrovski. Yes, would you?
I'm pointing to Novacek. He's
yes, then Mr. Nowacki. Yes, please. Henrik?
Thank you very much. From my observation, the largest challenge now, the biggest challenge now is to get an easy access to finance. We are lacking cash flows among companies, specifically among small and medium-sized enterprises. And the major thing now is to secure cash flow, so we can also, as a result, secure the supply chains among number of companies. And so this is what we are observing now here in Poland with SMEs, that if the situation won't change within weeks, basically, they will lose their cash flow. If that happens, most of us are out of business. So an easy, very fast access to cash flow capital, and this is something we have experience with EU funds, with EU programs, dedicated loans for SMEs. So we have a strong experience in that.
So now we have the commissioner in the webinar. I give now the floor to Ivan Stefanec for the introduction of the Executive Vice President Vladis Dombrovskis. Ivan.
Thank you, Horst. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Valdis Dombrovskis, Executive Vice President of the European Commission, who is not only extremely professional in his job, but also he is a very good friend of SME. So really, I do appreciate that you dedicated your time to us, Valdis, and we are looking for your initiatives. We have already recognize some of them at the European Parliament level, all of them very, very useful. So particularly if you can highlight what Commission has prepared for SMEs, it would be really very appreciated. Thank you very much for your time, and floor is yours.
Good morning, honorable SME Europe colleagues. I would say that as a former vice president of SME Union, your predecessor organization, it's always a pleasure to be with you with SME Europe. So let me start by expressing my solidarity with you and the dramatic situation you and your members are facing. So since the beginning of the crisis, European Commission has emphasize a lot and need to support the real economy. This means supporting companies, especially SMEs, to ensure that they can live through these difficult months. Because the basic idea of our crisis response in area of economy is to ensure that we protect companies and jobs to the extent possible, not to lose productive capacity of our economy, because this will determine how quickly European economy will be able to recover after the crisis. The more we protect our capacity, the quicker we'll be able to return. To mention now concrete measures, concrete steps, there are several areas of work on liquidity, on support of employees. So probably I will go through different instruments which are currently being used. So one of our focuses is on supporting the employees through short-term employment schemes or similar measures, well, what Germans call Kurzarbeit schemes, in other words, to help to keep companies, people in jobs. Member states, of course, are in front line in this. They are the ones designing and putting forward the programs, but from European Commission side, we are coordinating this, also issuing recommendations for common course of action in this area. And actually, just today, we will be unveiling a new European instrument to support those temporary work schemes, so-called SURE instrument, support to mitigate unemployment risks in an emergency. It will be emergency instrument under Article 122 of the treaty, basically providing loans to member states, back-to-back loans up to 100 billion euros on favorable terms, so that member states can finance those temporary work schemes. Because what we see is that measures which member states are ruling out in this acute stage of crisis, first feedback from SMEs on those schemes is positive. So we want to support member states that they have financing actually for those schemes. Then we are looking at our fiscal and state aid rules. So basically, we have now provided full flexibility on our fiscal and state aid rules, so that member states can support companies both from fiscal point of view and through our state aid framework. And we are mobilizing the EU budget, including through our 37 billion euros coronavirus response investment initiative, and also mobilizing the European Investment Bank group to provide short-term liquidity to SMEs. So when we now discuss immediate relief to SMEs hit by crisis, EU budget provided a guarantee to European Investment Fund, so that they can provide liquidity to SMEs and mid-caps. And we estimate that with around 8 billion euros of financing, it will provide help to at least 100,000 European SMEs. In the coming days, European Investment Fund will publish a revised call of expressions of interest for these financial intermediaries which want to participate in this scheme, and then SMEs can apply directly to the local banks which will be participating in this scheme. Looking at further steps, so European Investment Bank already mobilized some 20 billion euros of its own resources to provide financing to SMEs. And currently, we are discussing a new proposal from European Investment Bank, which is to create a 25 billion euros pan-European guarantee fund backed by member states, so that EIB group can provide once again SMEs, mid-caps, corporates with more than 200 billion euros of loans through this instrument. So to be clear, this would require member states agreeing on to provide those guarantees. The same goes actually for the SURE instrument. And this will be those will be topics which we'll be discussing in Eurogroup next week. Then talking about some further steps, in order to support liquidity needs of scale-ups, the Commission is advancing its publication to call financial intermediaries under so-called escalar. So basically, it's a first of a kind risk-reward mechanism to boost availability of venture capital funds for scaling up and for actions. It's one of the key actions in the recently adopted SME strategy. And we also proposed to shorten time to contract in all procurements and grant award processes, where we're also working to streamline procedures so that we can ensure that payments are actually reaching companies as fast as possible. So the last call from European Innovation Council is open to startups and SMEs with market creating innovations, proposals that can help to address current coronavirus outbreak. We received more than 4,000 proposals, more than double the average number, and we will fast track the selection process so that once again money can flowing. Also, as a general rule for Horizon 2020, the deadlines for almost all calls closing before 15th of April have been extended by the week, and we will be assessing situation as it evolves. We have ensured that calls for proposals under European Defence Industrial Development Programme have been published without delay. This includes also calls for proposals worth 10 million euros specifically dedicated to SMEs. Our Enterprise Europe network is helping SMEs to respond to the crisis, giving practical support and information to those working on innovations. The SME Envoy network has been activated to share national best practices and bring a variety of national actions together at the coordinated level at EU level. So as you see, there is a number of work streams which we are currently employing to respond to the crisis. Well, the work is not stopping there. So also later today, we will propose additional flexibility for the use of EU funds, so that member states are able to use all uncommitted EU funds to fight the crisis. So it includes flexibility for transfers between funds and between categories of regions. We will also propose that undertakings in difficulties, so SMEs in difficulties because of a corona crisis, will be able to use funds for their working capital. So for this to happen, we proposed amendments to ERDF regulation, basically aligning with our current temporary framework for state aid. And importantly, I would underline that we need to prepare a new multi-annual financial framework, so as of next year, so that it meets the needs of post-crisis recovery, that it's ambitious, that there is a strong investment component in the budget, and we will need to have also ad hoc solution for 2021 as part of this MFF plan in terms of availability of funding. Because if we'll be doing business as usual with programming, with all kind of strategies, operational programs agreeing between member states and the Commission, we would be spending 2021 in programming the funds and not using them. And this is not acceptable in current situation. So we will propose ad hoc solution to ensure that from the next multi-annual financial framework, money can flow to the economy, to the SMEs already as of beginning of the year. So that's very briefly to outline our different strands of work. In parallel, as you know, we're also working with the banking sector, where there are welcome measures by European Central Bank, including so-called LTRO program, which is there to provide liquidity to banks so that they can continue to lend to the economy. And we are using all the flexibility within our prudential rules to ensure that there is a capital relief to banking sector. So once again, that they can lend more, and through our state aid framework and fiscal framework flexibilities, we ensure that member states can actually provide guarantees to companies so that they can actually receive loans from the banking sector. This is just another element to complement the picture. So thank you very much, and I'm open to your questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Dombrovskis. I think you give us a very, very good overview about the actions of the European Commission, of the European Union. I think it's a strong commitment. And I hope, and I think this is the duty of us, of our organizations, to communicate to SMEs how they can approach this help, that they also know that the European Union is helping, so that we are really also not only, if you say like the focus, doing good, but also talk about this. I think it's very important. And now we have the possibilities to have 3 questions, and we are already prepared. And the first question is coming from our board member of SM Europe, member of the European Parliament, Pernille Weiss. The floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you, Vice President Dombrovskis, for taking your time to also be in this first ever webinar of SME Europe. We are very thankful for that. Before COVID-19 and the Corona crisis, some meant, and I tend to agree on the broader picture, that the climate was the emergency case number 1 on the globe. So we thought a couple of months ago that that was the pivotal challenge also for the EU. So now we have to deal with 2 crises, and actually 2 important recovery plans. That is, of course, one we are in the midst of with the Corona, but also with the climate. And I am very curious to hear from you what thoughts you have on how to combine what we need to do in the recovery plan due to Corona, but also to do it in a way that we continue to decarbonize Europe, that we continue to support green jobs to grow, and also to show the rest of the world that are not based on the same democratic foundations as the shared heritage of us as Europeans, that we can actually do both. We can recover from Corona, and we can continue to be the role model in the climate change that everybody is asking EU to do. So how can we create green growth while doing the recovery after this Corona crisis is my question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this question. Indeed, already now we are starting to work on EU recovery strategy, so post this pandemic. And I was outlining the basic concept that right now, during the crisis, we need to preserve the productive capacity of our economy, which will allow for a speedy recovery. But at the same time, our initiatives, European Green Deal, our work on digital Europe, these initiatives remain valid. They remain there. So when we will be drafting our recovery strategy, certainly we will be drafting in a way to ensure that we can ensure that this is a green and digital recovery. Of course, I could imagine there will be some trade-offs or some things we would need to look at in this context, because of course in current context it's important to preserve the economy, it's important to preserve the jobs. So this may bring, you know, some adjustments, but this will not change the basic or the main direction. So from that point of view, I can reiterate that European Green Deal and the work on digital Europe continues, and this will be part of our recovery strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we're coming now to the second question from Arnaldo Apote, Officer Euroshop.
Yes, hello, good morning. Good morning, Mr. Dombrowski. Nice to see you again. I have really appreciated the mention that you made of the different measures you are taking, we are taking at European level to support and facilitate the economic situation in member states. Now, we are witnessing a kind of relaxation of rules that have been governing the European economy for the past number of years and decades. We are also discussing with our members to which extent a certain extension or postponement of implementation of rules could be adopted these days. We know that the implementation goes through a long process. That process involves also consultation with stakeholders, but we know by experience that nowadays asking our members, the small business, to answer to consultation is a burdensome activity, and they are not necessarily ready to do so. So extension of a transition period and extension of consultation process and postponement of legislative processes that are ongoing in Europe. The first part of the question is that something that the European Commission is considering to do? But second question is, once that we have relaxed the rules, as you have said, now we are using the state aid as we were never thought to be used before, how and to which extent we could come back to the previous situation where the rules were very strict and very difficult to follow.
Okay. Then there were several questions. So first on a question of relaxation of rules. So what we are emphasizing that what we are currently doing, of course, is temporary. When we launch the general escape clause of EU fiscal rules, it provides temporary relaxation of rules, so no restrictions on budget deficit and debt. But member states, in any case, also in this period, need to keep in mind their medium-term debt sustainability. But in any case, it's a relaxation which is temporary in nature. Our state aid framework, currently it's called explicitly in title temporary state aid framework. When I was presenting you the measures we are now putting forward on flexibility within EU funds, it's also temporary measures. We may need to use also more flexibility in 2021. So currently the aim is to make sure that member states can use unallocated funds of 2020, which are still there in this multi-annual financial framework for coronavirus response. We'll need, for different reasons, flexibility in 2021 to ensure that actually money flows to economy, that we are not used in usual programming procedures. But eventually, the aim is to return to normal rules. Because, well, rules are there for a reason. We need fiscal sustainability. We need level playing field in EU single market. We need accountability as regards spending of EU budget. So, so from that point of view, I could imagine us returning to normal rules as the situation normalizes. It may be, I'm not promising this, that we may find some of the features of relaxed rules or more flexible rules actually useful and may be willing to retain them. That may be a separate discussion as situation normalizes, but in any case, what we are doing now is meant to be temporary. Then on postponement of certain things. Yes, certain things are being postponed. For example, Basel Committee last week announced that they would postpone the rules on financial sector by 1 year, so-called Basel III rules. And we have said accordingly that we will do the same correspondingly in our EU legal framework. So we would postpone introduction of those Basel III rules. On consultations, actually now we are looking at the consultations which are in my area responsibility, more specifically on consultations which are in DG FISMA, and large will try to postpone them by 4 weeks. Then we will need to see how situation evolves and see whether we need to postpone it further. But currently the idea is indeed to prolong those consultations by 4 weeks. Then on legislative work, already now we have adjusted our Commission's work program for this year, and we are indeed kind of delaying, postponing number of legislative initiatives. So most of them, the postponement is in a range of 1 quarter, but we will have to see how situation evolves also there, because as you know, from one point we postpone the legislative initiatives which were there in our work program. On another hand, we now are producing many new legislative initiatives to respond to this emergency. So also from that point of view, we also need some capacity, and it's logical that we do some postponement. So that's briefly on our regulatory response. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're coming now to our last question from Marcin Nowacki, Vice President of Union of Entrepreneurs and Employees of Poland. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Horst. Good morning. First of all, let me share my general comment. The way we are now tackling the crisis, as well as the way we will exit the situation, will form the new economic situation globally. And it will determine the competitive advantages for Europe and for our member states. We must remember that this is critical now. The timing is critical. How we're gonna approach the situation and what measures, what solutions will be implemented. We are also delivering that message to the Polish government, Polish MPs, that we need to really open up our economy and also deregulate our economy. And very specific question I have, you have answered the question I was going to ask about the package, the financing package for SMEs, and your message is quite optimistic that there are money, not just from the European Investment Bank, but also from other sources that will be dedicated to SMEs. Do you also do you have any plans to loosen EU restrictions on public aid for SMEs? This is my question now.
Yeah, thank you for this question. Well, indeed, it's already happening. I was mentioning temporary state aid framework, which is already in place, and where member states are already putting forward their state aid schemes, and the Commission is approving them in a matter of few days. So this is part of our crisis response, that when I was talking about flexibility of rules, I was talking about flexibility of fiscal rules and flexibility of state aid rules, because that's exactly the idea, that we need to be able now to provide liquidity to companies, provide different forms of state aid to companies, so that they can actually benefit from this situation. I will try to just a second find you more concretely what we are now allowing. So in this temporary state aid framework, we are now allowing direct grants and selective tax advantages, state guarantees for loans taken by companies from banks, subsidized public loans to companies, and safeguards for banks that channel state aid or financing to the real economy. So those are measures which are already allowed. And as I was mentioning today, we will be proposing more flexibility in use of EU funds, including possibility to provide ERDF, Regional Development Fund support to undertakings in difficulties if those difficulties arise from current coronavirus crisis. Because as you know, normally EU funds cannot be provided to undertakings in difficulties. In this special situation, if difficulties are related to coronavirus crisis, also there will be a possibility to provide EU funds financing to those companies. So to summarize, answer is yes, there is relaxation of state aid rules so that money can be channeled to companies. So once again, I wanted to thank you very much for this invitation to this, as you said, first webinar of SME Europe. And if there are any further questions, issues, we are always open to discuss and find solutions, because at current situation, supporting our companies, supporting our SMEs is very important to ensure that we can then have a speedy economic recovery afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Dombrovskis. We will send you our survey from what we created. We got a lot of answers from whole Europe of SMEs, what they need now. I think this is very interesting. Thank you very much also for your support. It was very short noted. Thank you also to your team, and it shows how important SMEs are for the European Commission. And thank you for your personal relation to us. And we will see us, I hope, soon again, in better times also again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
So now we're starting with the input. So if you have questions to the commissioner, we're collecting this, and because now not everybody had the possibility to ask. So we will collect them and we will deliver this then to you then. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Bye. So now we're coming to the impulse statements. And I think we're starting now directly with Mr. Benedikt Blomeyer from Director of EU Policy Allied for Startups. I think we start here because startups are forgotten often, but we have in the survey already reactions from startups because they are also in crisis, they're prepared. And I think we have also to hear this voice very strong, and we have to listen to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I'm happy to see we're in the same boat on this crisis. I know protocol is a bit harder to follow in the online format, but I did still want to thank the Executive Vice President and the honorable members, Vice and Stefanitz, for participating, and Horst and Henrik and the entire team at SME Europe for putting this together. Just for those of you who don't know AFS, Allied for Startups is the global association of startup associations. Our members are the Spanish Startup Association or the Danish Entrepreneurs Foundation. And yeah, as Horst said, our slogan very much is, in Brussels and other capitals, decisions are being made about startups. So you're either at the table or on the menu. So I'd like to start by saying that, of course, in this extraordinary time, policymakers can count on the unrestricted support of the innovation community and entrepreneurs. It goes without saying that health and safety of citizens is paramount. One way startup communities are stepping up is through hackathons, which help develop and scale to the market technological solutions to help identify and treat COVID-19. Startups like Velmio, which is an Estonian pregnancy health app, has actually built a corona tracker to help people analyze symptoms. Or Miracle is a French platform startup which has just launched Stop COVID FR, a marketplace to help nurses and doctors acquire essential supplies like PPE. So please continue to count on startups as part of the solution. Now, looking forward into the future, an economic recession is obviously imminent, and startups have much potential. but they are also smaller and more fragile economic actors. By definition, startups and SMEs have less cash flow and fewer resources to stay afloat in an economic recession, since they invest their resources into headcount and growth. So in other words, we would like to say that startups and SMEs will be a litmus test of the overall effect of the COVID-19 outbreak on the economy. If they run into liquidity issues because demand has collapsed, the entire economy will follow. And from the data we've seen thus far, we're really looking at an existential situation. I've checked some data this morning that we've seen come from the German ecosystem, where 9 out of 10 startups are saying they already feel a negative impact, and 62% say they are strongly negatively impacted in their business model right now. So what we've done is, with our members, we've put together a Corona emergency toolkit on our website for immediate measures for governments to take to support startups. It includes setting up a national and a European task force to establish a continuous dialogue between governments and startups and innovation communities, setting up a one-stop shop to inform startups and businesses with all relevant information and resources, and taking measures to ensure startups do not face a liquidity crunch, which includes measures like postponing monthly and fiscal tax deadlines. Be happy to elaborate on this in the Q&A, but I'd like to add 3 remarks to the debate on the coordinated response for SMEs and startups. First of all, and this also goes to the European Commission, we're thankful for the support that has been given so far, but many of our members across the continent are saying that this is not enough yet. This economic crisis will be worse than the 2008-2009 crisis, as demand has collapsed literally overnight and there's no end in sight. The reality for startups in our membership has radically changed. For them right now, it's all about securing cash flow for the next 4 to 6 weeks, and they will need more support. Secondly, while we've seen some big bazookas being unloaded by governments across the EU, we are seeing many different responses across member states. Fundamentally, we think that a startup in Germany, or an SME for that matter, shouldn't be disadvantaged because it's in Germany and not in France. And I think the prior question was a great example of that. And the Commission's role should be in coordinating for one, about helping member states target their bazookas effectively, essentially, sharing best practices, making sure we're allocating the resources smartly, the best tools possible. And we'd like to say that if we didn't have an EU strategy going into the crisis, let's have a European exit strategy going out of it. Lastly, going forward, we'd encourage policymakers to make startups and SMEs central to your plans for growth coming out of the recession. Startups, for that matter, hire 3 times more employees than other economic sectors. So let's ensure that they have what they need to kickstart the economy coming out of this crisis. And as MEP Weiss also alluded to, let's use the opportunity to make a bet on startups and SMEs to deliver on some of the other policy priorities. For instance, working towards the European Green New Deal, when we revamp our economy in a less carbon-intensive way. Or when we design rules for digital services, let's think of the startups that have less resources, as we are seeing right now. Please count on our support going forward. I'd be happy to answer questions in the Q&A.
Thank you very much. I think you gave us a really a good overview. I think one idea I have now, because there's so many good activities and projects in this Connect, but how to find it? So we should have collecting all these different projects on one website that you can send to SMEs and say, here's an overview. This is you can find for startups. This is from the private sector. This is from the government. This is from the European Commission. I think it's very hard to find all this information for SMEs. Thank you very much. And now we're going to Amit Reschener. And I think this is very important. Banks. I think this is a question because you have the duty or the mission now to deliver the credits and to the SMEs. We are very appreciating that you're taking part of this webinar. The floor is yours, Amit, please.
Thank you very much, and good morning from my side as well. A big thank you for organizing this very interesting panel discussion and very important during those times. And since I'm the bank representative here, I would like to share some insights of what we have been concentrating on at the moment, and what we saw are the biggest challenges for SMEs. So, for instance, the overall priority is the health, the physical health of the people, that is for sure. But the second already is the economic health, what we call, and where we step in, the financial health of the economy. So the banks at the moment must ensure the financial health. So what do we see for SMEs at the moment? SMEs are especially vulnerable in those times, more than other companies. Why is that so? I saw an OECD input for not long ago, where the OECD said that SMEs may have less resilience and flexibility in dealing with the corona shock. The corona shock is twofold. So we have one, the demand shock, and the second is the supply shock. So SMEs must deal with those two shocks, as the others also do. But let me give you an example of what does it mean for an SME, and where is maybe the difference and the challenges. If we talk about social distancing, we all have to do social distancing at the moment. And if I think of a small SME, let's say, for example, a small clothes shop, after the crisis, in a few weeks, when the clothes shop has the possibility to reopen, still there will be some social distancing, and the small SME is very much dependent on every single person coming into the shop. So this will be crucial for the SMEs in future to survive, also to see whether these obstacles can be there can be countermeasures against these obstacles. If we think now of a big manufacturer, of course, a big manufacturer as well is hit by the crisis. For example, a car manufacturer. However, a car manufacturer, in the next weeks, when they are allowed to reopen their manufacturers, their enterprises, they will catch up a lot easier and a lot, because they are not so much dependent on people, on a single person coming into their shop and buying one piece of clothes. So SMEs are a lot more dependent and a lot more vulnerable at the moment. And of course, they need a lot of liquidity. So it is very important for the financial institutions to provide them with liquidity as fast as possible. And here we see that the EU and also the member states already provided a lot of measures, and we're very happy for that. However, there are still too many bureaucratic burdens for smaller enterprises, for not only the SMEs and the micros, so really small enterprises as well, I guess startups, that there still are a lot of requirements that smaller enterprises cannot fulfill. So they might not get liquidity as swiftly as possible. So their cash flows are endangered, and in the end, the economy and the small SME is endangered. So this is a big problem at the moment. And here the Commission should focus, I think, on even more reducing the bureaucratic burdens. And the funds that are there are very good and very helpful, but still we see in the banks that not 100% of the funds can lead directly to SMEs, but there are some bureaucratic hurdles. So this is what we see in terms of SMEs, and then what the other very important topic is, which I wanted to point out, is that of course the financial sector are affected from the coronavirus. What does this mean for us is that a lot of our employees also face physical difficulties. And of course, also a lot of employees have to stay at home because of the health issues, or because of other issues that they need to stay at home because they need to take care about their children, for example. So what does this mean for us? For us, it is important that the moment we see that the SMEs really need us and we are there 24 hours a day to secure liquidity. And what does this mean for our resources? Our resources are focused in this area at the moment. So, and this was also mentioned today already for the Commissioner Dombrovskis, we also have resources normally that are dedicated for implementing legislation which doesn't have anything to do with Corona, which was finalized a year ago or maybe 2 years ago, which under normal circumstances would be implemented now in the next weeks or months. And here it is important to postpone the implementation of finalized legislation until the Corona crisis is over, because we really have to bundle our resources into, at the moment, the economy, safeguarding, taking measures, providing liquidity for the SMEs, and we cannot split resources and having some parts of the resources in implementing legislation, which is not important for Corona, and on the other side taking resources, and then we have not enough resources to help providing the liquidity, which is important very much. So we have to use our full power in supporting SMEs and protecting our economy. So this is it.
Thank you very much. I think this gave us now a really good point. I think it's important that we have to postpone this legislation. SME Europe was writing already a letter to the Commission about this, signed by Pernille Weiss and Mr. Stefanetz from our board, that we have really to get an overview what is important now, and also to take in focus, you have limited resources. Also SMEs have at the moment limited resources, and they cannot implement European legislation at once on the deadlines that they are coming up. So I think this is a very important point. Because we have now 50 minutes, we have also input statement, but I would like also to give now the opportunity for first questions also again, because the time is running very fast on the webinar. We have to learn this also. So perhaps one question, please, if you can make a statement verbal, not only written, would be best. Who wants to start?
Yeah,
please
just raise your hand. Okay, Paul Rübig once again. Let's try it. Yes, Mr. Rübig, the floor is yours. Yeah, why is it? Okay.
No, it's not working. So going to the next then.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Rübig. Okay, Miss Andrea Glorioso.
The floor is yours.
Please introduce yourself.
I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Good.
Please your name and company or association you represent.
Absolutely. My name is Andrea Glorioso. I'm an official of the European Commission, but I'm asking the question in a very personal capacity. So I understand these are very challenging times and the difficulties for SMEs, also for family reasons, to be clear. But a question needs to be asked, how do we make sure that the very necessary support that we're collectively giving to SMEs will not create more zombie firms? In other words, how do we tailor the support so that we help the companies that really need help, but not the companies that, sorry to be blunt, were already on the point of disappearing and would probably have disappeared whether or not we would have had this terrible crisis. Again, I want to underline, I fully support all the bazookas that we're putting out there, but at some point we also need to think, because the problem is that if we support companies that don't quote unquote deserve it, we're not giving enough resources to the companies that on the other hand actually deserve this support. I will be interested in the thoughts, and please, I want to underline this is a personal question. It does not represent the position of the European Commission.
Thank you very much. I think always one question, one answer. I think this is an answer perhaps for Nowatzki. Marcin, is this something, what is your feeling? Fast help, or is this fast help problematic that we're supporting the wrong companies, or we should help and see this afterward? What is your opinion?
I believe we should help, but in a way that we're giving loans, not grants directly to companies. I think low percentage loans, this is the best solution. And second is deregulation and pro-market solutions. We must go back to our roots. It goes about single market and the European Union. We must open up. What is happening now with borders, closing borders, is a very bad situation for supply chains. I don't understand that. I think European Commission should be very strong on that, because we are losing and we are basically dividing our supplies across member states. So pro-market solutions and going back to our roots. And also this is the best time, after a number of years, we were asking to open up the freedom of services. This is the time we should do it finally, because this freedom is not working since the very beginning. We should really open up services across Europe, and that will help a lot to micro and small companies. And I also believe, coming back to the message of Mr. Commissioner, that we should limit, definitely we should limit the Green Deal policies these days. I mean, this is all very costly. I understand the ultimate goal, but for now we need to concentrate on our economy, and we cannot run costly initiatives. And this is a very costly initiative.
Okay, I think we can discuss also in one other webinar. I think this is a long question. The next question, please.
Yeah, just press the button, raise hand, and then I will unmute you. Anyone in the audience, feel free, okay.
I think, yes. I think one element must be to put down bureaucracy, to put all elements away who are stopping business. I think this is before you be starting with money, because in fact, this is already also in help. And I think Arnaldo Abruzini was mentioned this already. I think we have so many burdens already, and you are also afraid that these burdens are coming back after this. Your short statement, what is your vision, I think? Is this a chance really to get rid of all this stuff?
This is certainly a chance to rethink the way we are structured. As we have seen, the European Union as an institution with the Commission, the Council, and the Parliament, it is not a far front for emergency. That role has been covered by the member states. And now what we are advocating are actions at European level, while until a few days ago we were saying, oh, the European level should stop legislating and adding burden to the businesses, so please don't make our life more difficult. So it is a little bit a paradox what we're living. I want to remind everyone that the European Commission has also some structures that for the time being, at least from my perspective, are lost in action. For instance, there is a European Center for Disease Prevention and Control. Have you heard anything about this? I mean, they should be on the emergency front with everybody. They are lost in action. They have also a commissioner which is for crisis management, and he's handling also the civil protection. Have you heard anything about him? Now, my point is, we cannot ask the European level to do something that is not structured for. The role of emergency player is on member states level. They are those that have intervened massively at the beginning or during this crisis, and now they're deploying their measures to alleviate the impact of the COVID-19. The role of the European institutions should be trying to coordinate the measures, trying to secure that we follow similar rules, not to create within the internal market zones of privilege and zones of less privilege. And third, looking at the future. And it would be very interesting what I just mentioned, Novatsky, how the Green Deal will be handled, because that is about the future. That was the main policy of the European Union until a month ago. Now, what will happen on this? Do we just drop it because of the emergency, or we drop it temporary, as the Commissioner Dombrovskis was saying, or that will be forever? So the role of the European institutions cannot be the role of the fire brigade on the ground. That is member states' role. We should look at the future and look at how administrative and regulatory and legislative burdens and rules will be followed by all. This is the value of the internal market. If we lose that, we lose everything we've been working for the past 60 years.
Thank you very much, Arnaldo, for this very strong message. I think we are in danger in general in the structure of the European Union. But I want to give now the last chance now for a question, because we have only 6 minutes left. Perhaps somebody would like to raise his hand. But I think if you're discussing this, where can be the solution? I have 2 points. One, how fast can be this changes, how we can reform Europe in this way, in this crisis, in the same time. And the second thing, if we have all these programs, who is financing this at the end? Because it seems we have many programs, but where's the limit of our resources? I think spending money is one point, but the point is we avoiding the crisis now to creating the next crisis in the next year. So could, Arnaldo, perhaps you can give a response, and then perhaps Amrit.
This is a very interesting debate, but the answer is very easy. Resources are coming from member states. There is no own resources coming at European level. So, but member states today, they're much more keen in maintaining those resources for themselves because they need for facing the emergency. So the debate of the next multi-annual financial framework is a debate that will, take even more time today because of the constraints member states are facing for. But there is one element I want to underline once again. This is an emergency. Probably our world will not be the same as before after the crisis, but we desperately need to think about the future. We cannot only bound our minds on the emergency. This is absolutely necessary. Yes, it is. But then what's next? And what's next has to do with the policies we were discussing before the crisis. This is our future. We cannot imagine to abandon the discussion about the role of EU in the global scale. What about all the free trade agreements and the discussions we are having with third countries to facilitate the trade and investment of our companies? What about also the Green Deal? What about the decarbonization of our planet? What about the entrepreneurial spirit and the lack of skills we have in our businesses? That does not disappear because of the crisis. It will be more acute after the crisis. So we do need the European level not discussing too much about the emergency element. This is member states' role. And I remind all of us a sentence of Angela Merkel, a last council, in saying, at the end of the day, those are decisions taken by member states. So let's focus on strategy. And strategy are the same policy we were dealing before. They are not changed. They remain And as this crisis will be over, we will be tackling exactly the need to have a global agreement for access, trade, and investment, the necessity to have skilled people on the ground, the decarbonization of our economy, and the digitalization of the economy as well.
So this sounds very complicated also, because this is a huge work to solve a crisis and develop a strategy in this crisis for the future. I think this is a point where we're coming also to the end of this webinar. And I think this is a political closing, in fact, it's needed. Perhaps I surprise you, but perhaps a last comment only about you heard Pernille Weiss and then Ivan Stefanec, perhaps something like a summarizing or impression what you have from the first webinar now. Please, Pernille Weiss.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, for your contributions and your very wise words. I don't disagree on many things that are said. I only want to underline that from SME Europe and from the EPP group, we will go forward by being co-creative and invite for dialogue on this recovery actions to be taken. And I also want to underline that I really do hope that we can support the core entrepreneurship of SMEs all over Europe to actually raise ourselves on two legs. One is the European Green Deal. The second is the SMEs in all businesses to grow into the future. We cannot exclude the European Green Deal because of the corona, and we cannot recover from corona if we do not work with the possibilities in the European Green Deal. Thank you so much, everybody, and please take care and remember to wash your hands.
Thank you very much. And Ivan Stefanec, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Horst, and thank you everybody for excellent contributions. I'd like to stress out three things which came also out from this debate. First one was we shouldn't forget about single market. We should still focus on implementing all the initiatives which will remove the obstacles, remove constraints. Secondly, we still have to keep fighting against bureaucracy, which is our enemy, and we should not forget even in this time of crisis. And last but not least, access to finance. Also, it was very visible from the practical experience SMEs that now the liquidity is the issue. So we have to do everything what we can in order to help SMEs to have better access to finance and to overcome this crisis. I do believe that this was very good experience, this webinar, and I'm happy to continue and to cooperate with all of you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, and I want to also thank to our speakers and to our president and board member Ivan Stefanec, Pernille Weiss. I want to also give a short summarizing for us what SME Europe will do. Of course, it needs fast action, but with a long-term approach. But for this is first, our step is to inform SMEs. So we want to, with our partners, to build up a website perhaps to inform about all the projects, information, what we are doing at the moment. We are collecting this. This could be a first step that SMEs can find easy this information, these programs, and also projects. And the second thing is we collecting all the questions we have now written. You can also send us via email. We try to answer all questions you have. We will ask also our partners. I think it's important. If you have really problems, we cannot solve everything as SME Europe, but we will try always to answer you, to find a solution perhaps that we find in partner who can give you this answer or can give you the directly help. Thank you again. We have our next webinar in the afternoon at 4 about food safety. We will have an entrepreneur from Italy, from Lombardia. He will give us inside information about what is now, how to work to produce under the Corona crisis. It's a very impressive story because it's not about only technical side. It's also about human human tragedies, because if you see that from the workers, the parents are dying and so on, how to handle this as entrepreneur and how to survive also economically. So you please feel you're invited in the afternoon, and we will have also a Monday a broader picture about the European economy, a global approach. We will have also an event about global trade with Commissioner Hogan we are planning. So please inform you on our website SME Europe or on the website of SME Connect. Thank you very much and keep safe, keep healthy.
Thank you.
Bye.